I'm Cathy Slater. I'm one of the carer reps on the Learning Disability Partnership Board. I'm here to interview Michael Scott, who's the Chief Executive of Westminster NHS, about the big plan.
Hello.
I'm going to ask you some questions. The first is, Westminster Learning Disability Partnership's big plan, 2009 to 2012, has now been launched. Do you think the partnership's vision for health is a step in the right direction?
Yes, I do. It's very important that people with learning disabilities have access to really good hospitals and doctors in the community. That hasn't always been the case. I've worked in learning disability for many years now, almost 30 years. And I remember when people were in long stay hospitals and they didn't get access to the best doctors and nurses. And we want to change that. We want to make sure they can go to local hospitals and use local family doctors. So I think the statements around health are just right for the big plan.
The big plan identifies that there are health inequalities for carers and for people with learning disabilities. What would be your priorities to help to eliminate these inequalities?
Let me start first with people with learning disabilities. Very often they don't get the screening that's required for some of the big disease groups. So for instance, cancer screening, that might be breast screening, cervical, it might be bowel screening. Now they have a right to those screening opportunities. The best way for us to do that is to people to go to their local family doctors. But sometimes doctors forget to do those things. So we're putting in place some special systems that make sure local doctors give those screening opportunities to everybody. So that's my first point. My second is a healthy lifestyle. It's important for all of us that we don't smoke, we eat the right things, and we get exercise. And again, people with learning disabilities sometimes need some encouragement to do those things. I know we have some great schemes in leisure centres right now which are particularly for people with learning disabilities. So they're the sort of things we want to encourage into the future. Healthy lifestyles and regular health checks. And finally, people need to be checked out for things like diabetes, have their blood sugar assessed and their blood pressure. So there's lots of opportunities for people to get those health checks. Our job is to make sure they're available to everybody.
Thank you. The Carer Strategy 2008 has put carers as equal partners with paid professionals and agreed that they are experts in their own right. How do you think health professionals should be working with carers in the future?
I'll perhaps say something here about carers' health as well, and involvement of carers. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with people with learning disabilities before, and I've worked with their carers and families, and I learned at a very early stage that unless you speak to carers and families, people with learning disabilities themselves, then you don't get good services, because you don't understand where people's needs are and how they can best be met. So firstly, we have to work with carers groups, so where carers come together with one voice, and we understand where new services need to be developed, or where current services aren't working as well as they might. We also need to encourage all of our professionals to work one-on-one with each carer and really listen to what they're saying. It's a difficult thing to do, I think, for professionals, but a carer who's spent many years bringing up a son or a daughter, or working with friends, knows that person very well. They know their needs, they understand their needs, and it's our job to communicate well with people such that we can understand better what their needs are. Just a little bit on the health needs of carers. We know there's lots of rewards in caring, but there's stresses and strains too. And that might be physical, so it might be about lifting, about back care, it might be accidental injuries, it might be psychological, it might be about stress. We have a number of schemes in the health service that can help carers with those issues. We need to work very closely with the voluntary groups, so NHS Westminster and other groups like that, such that we can support carers to do what is sometimes a difficult job, but one that we need to support carers in making a success of.
Thank you. The Valuing People Now 2009 strategy says that the Department of Health will have a Valuing People Health Steering Group. to make sure that people with learning disabilities get the health care they need. What do you think your role will be in ensuring that health services in Westminster support any new ideas?
We looked at the big plan just this week in NHS Westminster in the PCT and spoke to the people who had some involvement in writing it, and we put a lot of our support behind the plan because we think it says the right things. So we're very keen that we support the next steps in making it happen. Now, the role of the NHS has changed over the years when we used to provide housing and a lot of direct care. And I think the change we've made is the right one. We've changed such that we're looking after the health needs. Like anybody else, people have health needs. We talked earlier about what they are. So I think the role for NHS Westminster increasingly is to make sure local doctors, family doctors, are not neglecting the needs of people with learning disabilities. They're focusing in on their special needs, and most particularly when people have to go into hospital, that they're well looked after. And one of my big focuses is that unfortunately in hospitals, they're big and busy places, people with learning disabilities don't get their special needs listened to. If they've got communication difficulties or diet issues, very often nurses are too busy to follow those. And therefore we've put in a special nurse at St Mary's Hospital, and her job will be to make that linkage and to make it work. So we think we've got a big role, but it's not the role we used to have. It's one very much around health and healthcare, and that's where we think we'll be playing our part.
All people with learning disabilities in Westminster should have access to an annual health check, and carers say they should be allowed to have their own annual health check too. What will be your priorities to make this happen?
Well, we're investing more money in learning disabilities. We've concentrated first on people with learning disabilities themselves, and I've mentioned a little bit about how we're encouraging local doctors to make that happen. We'll have another look at carers and see if we can make that same health check available to carers too, if that's something that people feel is a priority locally.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.